fifth conversation with. My name's Emma Smith, and I'm hoping, we've got participants coming through now, so sorry, I shouldn't have gone straight into interviews because we need them all to come through. So we'll give everyone a couple of minutes just to come through, Natalie, and then we will make a start. I'll just let a very noisy cat through the door. Hello. Oh, no. How many people have we got? Oh, 24. Oh. So my back door was open, but the cat insisted on me opening.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, 25 people. Okay. We'll give them a couple more minutes. I think we've 28 registered. So we'll give them one more. Oh, hi, Philly.
Hi, Philly.
I hope you've all got your brews ready. Natalie, you've got your water, haven't you? Water. Your gin and tonic.
My goldfish bowl.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, 28. I think. Oh, we just lost one. Went up to 28 and they went back
Peace of mind.
I think it must be me rather than you now.
Yeah, no,
sent them on the way.
Oh no, we've heard her speak before. She wasn't that good last time.
Okay, I think we're going to make a start. So welcome everyone to what is our fifth conversation with. My name's Emma Smith. I'm the project manager for Empowered Conversations of 6 Degrees Social Enterprise in Salford. And Natalie?
Yeah, I'm Natalie Yates-Bolton. I'm a senior lecturer in nursing at the University of Salford, and I'm an associate consultant with Hammond Care International.
Thanks, Natalie. So welcome everyone. We've got a really nice mix of an audience today. We've got lots of carers, we've got people with dementia, we've got some professionals, we've got friends and colleagues out there. So hello everybody. So just, if you've been to a few of these, it's going to follow that sort of similar sort of pattern. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Empowered Conversations and why we're doing these seminars. And then I'm going to hand over to Natalie, who's going to do her presentation. We're going to come back together, have a little chit chat about what she's been talking about, and then we'll go into a Q&A. So there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and there's also a chat function. So at any time, please start jotting your questions into the Q&A, and then we'll have time at the end to go through those. So I hope you've all found that. And yeah, there's a chat function as well, which is always nice when someone says hello. So I'll tell you a little bit about Empowered Conversations. We historically have delivered communication courses across Greater Manchester for the last 3 years, and Natalie's been, oh, Carolyn's got a hand up, don't know why, I hope it's just a wave. So we've been delivering courses for family carers and also professionals, and for the last year and a half we've been delivering one-to-one sessions with family carers in Salford through a project called Empowered Carers, and Rachel and Amanda have led on that work. Natalie and I actually go back way before all of that, don't we, Natalie? We've been working alongside each other for a few years now. I don't even know how long, maybe 5?
It was way back when we worked looking at setting up like Dementia Action Alliance in Salford. I think that's where we probably first met, or around that time.
Yeah, so maybe about 5 years ago. And then wonderfully, Natalie's been really involved with Empowered Conversations, sort of as we've developed the course and as we've been delivering that out to carers. Natalie, in her role at the university with some other colleagues, has been sort of really involved in that and supporting us with that work. So very quickly, so these seminars are sort of a bit of a response to COVID. We were going to do a conference back in March, which feels like 2,000 years ago now. And we didn't, but we'd already pulled together some fantastic speakers who were going to join us for that conference. So we twisted all their arms and asked them if they'd do these seminars. And thankfully they all said yes. So we've been running those seminars since dementia, what would have been Dementia Action Week in May. Initially we said 7, we're now looking like 11 which will take us till the end of July, and we're hoping to carry them on in September. So it's become a real thing for us. The other thing I should say is that in response to COVID, Empowered Conversations, sort of the team responsible for Empowered Conversations, have been doing online groups. So we've had online groups, online sessions, discos, art clubs, creative clubs, come and sing on a Friday with Margaret and Barbara, and we're starting our first online communication course tonight. So Paul, who's a wonderful facilitator, will be doing that. So it's the first time we've delivered that for family carers. We've done it for professionals in the past, but this will be our first family carer course tonight. I think that's enough jibber jabber from me. So I am going to hand over to Natalie. I'm going to get my brew and hand over to Natalie.
Thanks, Emma. Okay, so hopefully you can all see my screen there. So thanks, Emma, for inviting me to take part in one of these conversations. When Emma asked if I'd like to take part, I'd just been emailing her about some reading I've been doing, and it actually didn't start off as reading to do with dementia, but I'll explain where that came in a little while. And because that was like the last thought I'd had, was the email I just sent to Emma about this reading, about the moments of small connection, small moments of connection. I just thought, well, yeah, I'll talk about that. So that's the very logical reason that I chose to talk about this. But it was also what I was thinking about. So during lockdown, I've been doing some reading and reflecting on dementia and dementia communication, and this is where I'm at. So the smallest moments of connection. So I'll be exploring with you why the smallest moments of connection can be so important when connecting with someone who has dementia and with other people generally in life. I think what we talk about today isn't just exclusive for when we're communicating with people who have dementia and building those relationships. I think it's true for our relationships with family, friends and colleagues. So there's not going to be a lot of science in this, but I just thought it'd be useful to flag up a couple of words and phrases that I will be doing using later on. So I'll be talking about the hormone and neuromodulator oxytocin. So you might have heard of that in regards to mums breastfeeding and the skin-to-skin contact stimulating oxytocin. But oxytocin isn't just present in women, it's present in men, it's in all human beings, and the levels change according to what we're doing and who we're connecting with. And a much nicer phrase than oxytocin is the phrase calm and connect. So in some books you'll read that oxytocin promotes feelings of calmness and promotes social connection. So that's why I'll talk about oxytocin. And I'll just be talking briefly about the parasympathetic nervous system. So that'd be, parasympathetic would be a good word in Scrabble, wouldn't it? You get loads of points for that. In a paper I was reading about the parasympathetic nervous system, talked about how one of the outcomes of the parasympathetic nervous system can be increasing our likelihood of engaging in behaviours that are about tending to other people and befriending other people. So that's why I've been exploring the parasympathetic nervous system. And these two systems aren't separate, they interlink and they have a bit of a positive spiral going on. So it isn't just one or the other, they do connect. So when we get to the end of this presentation, I hope you'll think that what I've talked about does relate to empowered conversations and your experience of communicating with someone who has dementia. Because I think empowered conversation has a role to play, and any positive communication approach for connecting with people who have dementia has a role to play in creating opportunity for interaction, for communication, and really for these two systems here of oxytocin and the parasympathetic nervous system to come into play in the lives of people living with dementia and in the lives of their carers, because there's some really positive results from having oxytocin coursing through your body and impacting on your brain. And it's the same with the parasympathetic nervous system. When you're stressed, its partner, the sympathetic nervous system's all fired up. What we really want is the sympathetic nervous system to calm itself down, and as we do that, the parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us feel calm and promotes our well-being, comes into play. So we want more parasympathetic nervous system, and it's good to have oxytocin flowing. So that's really the science bit over and done with. Really, the focus of this talk is more about my reflections and reading that I've been engaging in over lockdown. So we'll explore some of these pictures, and if you're Salford, Manchester based, you might see a picture there that I've asked permission to use. So I reflected, and I've reflected quite a lot when I've been working in the area of dementia, that I didn't really get off to a very good start with dementia. The odds were stacked against me ever having a career that involved dementia. So in 1988, I was a student nurse down in Surrey, and I went on a placement to a psychiatric hospital, but I really think institution, a better word. I had a terrible experience, absolutely terrible. Not that the care was bad, but I was into this ward. I didn't really know much about dementia because it hadn't been a major or even minor part of the degree. I hadn't been told or taught or encouraged to think about how to communicate with people who have dementia. So there I was, dropped onto this ward, and really every nerve and fibre of my body jangled with discomfort and distress, really. So much so that after a few days, I was delighted to be diagnosed with cancer. That's how extreme it was. So I was a 22-year-old student nurse living in this institution, but I really didn't know what I was doing. I really just out of my depth and lost. And so delighted to get this diagnosis, packed my suitcase, skipped out of the hospital, and vowed never to work in the area of dementia. But obviously, something happened along the way. When I reflect back to that moment, I wonder how many of the people with dementia on that ward felt the same as me. I wonder how many of their nerves and every fibre of their bodies were jangling with that discomfort and feeling lost and not knowing how to communicate. So probably from having such a terrible experience, it then made me sensitive eventually, in a long way, over decades, to come to be involved in dementia. And I couldn't wish to be working in any other area. So 2 years after that terrible experience, I found myself, it wasn't an accident, I did get on a plane intentionally. I found myself in Australia, and I was working in a care home in Western Australia. And it was fine. I didn't really know much more about dementia or how to communicate with people who have dementia. I was just kind of muddling along, doing my best. And one day I was sat in the office writing up my notes in my little white nurse's uniform that they wear in Australia. And one of the residents who I'd been looking after came into the office, which really wasn't the right procedure. But I thought, oh, well, I just carried on writing. She seemed quite happy. Then she pulled a chair up right next to me, so close that in my mind we were sat on the same chair, but it was actually two separate chairs. And I tried to find a picture that would represent how close she sat next to me. So I Googled people sat close together, women sat next to each other, people in contact. There were no pictures on Google that really showed how close we were together, but this picture did. And I'm more of a dog lover than a cat lover. But this just summed it up, because actually she was so pretty, this woman, that her face was almost like a kitten. I've always remembered her with this kitten-like face. So she was sat right next to me, I'm writing away. And I just felt a real sense of calmness and peace, which was so different to what I'd experienced in the mental health psychiatric hospital. I felt a real sense of connection, even though no words were used. It was just a physical connection because our arms were touching. And I swear you could almost hear a bit of purring going on. And that was her and me. We just, no words, just that lovely feeling of connection. And we stayed like that probably for about 20 minutes. And I had to go and do some work. And the lady went off to do what she had on her agenda that afternoon. But it was just a really powerful moment. And that was probably about 30 years ago. And I can just still vividly remember it. So a lot of the moments that I'm going to share with you, I vividly remember them. And I just have never really understood why I remember them so vividly. When there were so many moments in that care home that I worked for 6 months, why is that the one that I really, really remember? And all the other moments that I share with you, I seem to remember them disproportionately. And it's through some reading that I've done in lockdown that I've started to understand why I might remember them as like really valuable memories. So fast forward, well, really 20 years later, I started to do a bit more dementia work. And then through working at the university and working with people like Emma, and this is the lovely Mike, whose wife has said is okay. Oh, I knew I'd get upset. We shouldn't do that. Emma, could we just explain who Mike is?
Oh, Mike House is a wonderful guy who gave his time at the University of Salford. So I think it was before they had associates involved at the university, and I think Mike was a forerunner to that. So he was really involved in the early days of the dementia work at the university. And I guess like as the Institute of Dementia was sort of forming as an idea, Mike was really involved at that point, and he would sort of really happily give talks and give his time to sort of, I just saw him at so many different things. He would just be really a really active person living with dementia. Is that all right, Natalie?
That's fine. So a lot of us will have had really good friendships with Mike, but within our friendship, we actually had a micro moment of connection when I had this yellow, I don't know what do you call them, like a banner across myself, because I was a helper at a conference that Emma and I had arranged for people with dementia, but it was organised by...
It's a sash, Natalie. I've just remembered the word sash.
A sash. I had a sash on because I was the helper, and Mike was one of the people with dementia who'd really helped with this conference. So we were having a chat, and I talked to him previously about skiing, and I just said, oh, we were just talking. I said, oh, and obviously, I know you like skiing, Mike. And it's like I'd given him a little electric shock, but in a good way. And he said, oh, how do you know I like skiing? I said, well, we've spoken about it before. And I said I knew which resort he'd been to, and been to the same resort. And then I had that very short conversation. Then there was like a moment of silence, but not a bad moment of silence. And he just looked at me and said, why do we get on so well? So we'd had like a micro moment of connection in a friendship that had evolved nicely. There was just this moment of a micro moment of connection, and that's really boosts your relationship. And I kind of felt that moment as well. So micro moments of connection are really where I'm going with this. But not all moments when we're with people who have dementia are smooth sailing. Sometimes there can be a bit of storminess in the interaction. And in one of my interactions recently, through my work as a consultant with Hammond Care, I was about to host a focus group with people who have dementia and the carers. And there was one man there who had dementia, and he really, didn't want to connect, didn't want to talk. But I was going around introducing myself to everybody, and everything I said to him was wrong and answered in a very negative way. I said, hi, my name's Natalie. What did you say that for? So I said, well, I just thought I'd introduce myself. Well, don't. So everything I tried, don't, no, that's wrong. And towards the end, I was just kind of kneeling in front of him. And I just said, I think you've got a really interesting story to tell, but I don't think you're going to tell me. And I looked at him, and there was a pause and a silence. And Emma's been teaching me to hold the silence for a bit longer. So pause, silence, all good. So then I said to him, kind of just automatically just put my hand on my chest. I said, I think you're going to keep it very deep, meaning like it's going to be deep in him, his story. And there's another pause. And he looked at me again, right in my eyes, and he said, you're exactly right. But then he half smiled, and for the rest of the focus group, which was 2 hours, he didn't really engage. That's absolutely fine. But there were a few moments of banter and humour between us. So those moments of connection, it really worked. And when he left, he was still like a little bit hostile on his way out, but it was said with a smile. So I thought that was a good outcome. So where does this link? Those are my reflections. I've got a few more to share with you later. But what have I been reading? So my reading was this book, nothing to do with dementia at all. I don't think dementia is even mentioned. So my journey with dementia has been a 30-year journey. But if you remember back, I was diagnosed with cancer at my first experience with dementia, and the two have kind of carried on like in parallel through my life. So 30 odd years later, cancer's still part of my story, as is the treatment. I'd read this book because it's called Cured. I thought, well, after 30 years, maybe this would be a good book to read. It's just newly published by a doctor from Harvard, and it's about people's stories of spontaneous recovery and remission from illnesses like cancer. Unfortunately, I've not had a chance to finish it because in this book, he mentions micro moments of connection, and that pinged me straight back into dementia. So I've not worked out how to sort my own life out just yet, but I will do, because it started me on this reading journey about, well, what are these micro connections? Because as I read this paragraph in the book, it just made me think of moments with the woman in the care home who sat next to me, of my moments with Mike, the moment who really didn't want to connect, but then we had that micro moment of connection. So it just sent me straight back into those moments. In this book, why the author is discussing it in terms of people with cancer and diseases that are really difficult to maybe treat and cure. He's talking about putting yourself in a life situation where you're doing all you can to get your body and your lifestyle in the calm and curing way. So he talks about the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the opposite of fight and flight. It's more about being calm and steady. He talks about the vagus nerve, which is the biggest and most important nerve in the parasympathetic nervous system, and there are lots of studies that show if that nerve is really active and your parasympathetic nervous system's active, it's a really good indicator of your overall health and well-being. So the more you can get yourself in a parasympathetic way of living, the better. But that's all going to have to be put on pause for my life just at the moment, because I'm still reading about how these micro connections relate to people living with dementia. So I thought I'd better read the book that this guy had read when he wrote his paragraph, and it's a book by Fredrickson, who, if you're a psychologist, which I'm not, you might be aware of her work. She does a lot of work on positive psychology. Her book's called Love, which is fine. I'm all for love, but I don't think that what she's describing I would necessarily label with the word love. What I prefer is her phrase positivity resonance, when you have those moments of connection and there's a resonance between the two of you. So with the lady I sat with in the office at the care home, with Mike, with the guy who connected but didn't want to connect any further in the focus group, there were moments of positive resonance. So sorry, Barbara Fredrickson, with your 20 years really state-of-the-art research, I wouldn't choose the word love, and I don't think it's a helpful word if we're working with people who wouldn't choose that word. But maybe this micro moment of connection, anybody I think could identify with that. So in her book on positive connection, she talks about this positivity resonance being a mirroring between the two people of a shared positive emotion. She talks about the biobehavioural synchrony that's going on in both people, so things like oxytocin levels rising and parasympathetic nervous system activity rising in both people, and how that leads to mutual care between the two people. And I think the three examples I've shared so far, mutual care was present as that micro connection happened, and then beyond that. And there's another paper by another research team in America who talk about emotional contagion, about emotions being contagious between people, especially when somebody has dementia. The more their brains are affected, the more they catch the emotions of the person that they're with. So it kind of resonated previously. In her book, Fredrickson talks about what we require if we want positive resonance to occur, and she talks about the people involved need to have a perception of safety in that situation. There needs to be connection going on, in both terms of senses and in terms of temporal connection, meaning we're both here together at the same time. And she talks about how this leads to this feeling of mutual care and compassion. The one I'm just going to pick out to explore a bit deeper is where she talked about connection, because it makes me think of what we do on Empowered Conversations, about the importance of eye contact. touch, voice, maybe mirrored body postures, and maybe mirrored gestures. But what I really liked are these words, because Emma, this is just what we talk about, isn't it? The need to take time to truly connect with others, to be physically and emotionally present, and it requires that you slow down. So I think those 3 short phrases really sum up what we're doing in empowered conversations. And I find time and time again with people with dementia and just people in my life, those 3 phrases are really just the way to go. So taking Fredrickson's list of what you need and what the outcomes will be, just thinking about the lady who sat next to me in the care home office, I felt safe in that situation. I'd kind of got all my work done, so I was ready to just sit and write, and she obviously felt safe just to come into the office, pull up a chair and sit next to me. There was a connection, but not face to face, because I was already sat writing, although I looked when she came in and looked to see what she was doing when she moved the chair. Our connection was into our arm, just through our side, and our mirrored body postures were that we were both facing the same way. But I do feel that there was compassion between us, even though no words were spoken, because we had that moment of connection. And I've had that experience again, and I've just got a picture there of some hands of a lady in one of the Hearthstone homes, one of John Zeisel's care homes in the States. So that the smaller hand, which is nicely manicured, is the resident's, and the clunky non-manicured hand is mine. And again, we weren't facing each other, we weren't making eye contact, and we weren't actually talking to each other because we were involved in a group activity, that the lady didn't seem to be able to put my hand out towards her, which she then took and then interacted with. But again, I felt this positivity resonance. So again, I think we both felt safe. We had this physical connection, and again, a feeling of mutual care, even though no words were spoken. So just picking up on some of the science that might have been going on and going back to the words and phrases I used at the beginning. So oxytocin, no, it isn't just for women who've had babies, it's in all human beings, and there are more and more studies going on. The studies I've read haven't been with people who have dementia, it's people without dementia, and the studies are showing that oxytocin is released during positive interaction between adults. So in those 3 examples I've given, oxytocin may well have been released in both of us. And oxytocin is involved in forging new social bonds. So a social interaction that's positive happens, oxytocin levels increase, which then forges that social bond, and kind of it's an upward spiral. But oxytocin has also been shown to have other beneficial effects, not just social effects, that it's thought to be pain relieving, and it's thought to be an anti-stress and anti-inflammatory effect, and physically restoring the body, such as healing wounds, have a role. So if there's something we should be putting ourselves in a situation where we have more of something, and that the people we love and care for have more of, it's oxytocin, and it's got a role in the calm and connect response. So in each of those 3 examples, there was a calmness and a connection in those situations. But of course, I didn't take blood samples, so I don't really know what was happening with our oxytocin levels. But from what I've been reading during lockdown, I feel that our oxytocin levels were rising. The other biological system I mentioned was the parasympathetic nervous system, and the vagus nerve being the main one there. And it's a big wandering nerve that comes from your brain, goes into your heart, goes to your intestine, it's into your lungs. It's like a major highway. And in Fredrickson's book, she found that people who experience the most frequent positivity resonance when they're connecting with others have the biggest increase in the activity of the parasympathetic nerve, the vagus nerve. So in the books and papers, they call it vagal tone, and it just means that this nerve is really active and really responsive. And in studies, they're finding that the more active your parasympathetic nervous system is, the impact is on your well-being, both psychologically, emotionally, and physically. So for carers of people with dementia, we all know it's a stressful situation. If we can create opportunities where the carers can increase their moments of positive connection with the person with dementia. The well-being impact is going to be on the carer, but also it's going to have the same effect, you'd imagine, on the person with dementia. But I haven't read any studies, so I'll just have to flag that up, that I've not read any studies that say that has that effect on people with dementia. But all you can do is take what I'm saying and then see how that bears out in your life as a carer, as a person with dementia. As you start to feel calm in a connection with somebody, what happens? Do you start to get a really enhanced sense of well-being? It's just something I think to really pay attention to, that I think it's beneficial probably to both people. There was a study that I read about the parasympathetic nervous system and people with dementia, and how maybe certain types of dementia, where like they talked about the behavioural variant of frontotemporal lobe dementia, that there the parasympathetic nervous system may be affected. So people with that type of dementia might struggle to show empathy, to show concern and compassion. So it's not that they're being mean, difficult. The nervous system has been eroded, and so it may be more difficult for them to respond with empathy and with compassion. In the same study with people with Alzheimer's, the parasympathetic activity and likelihood of showing compassion and empathy was much less affected. So I've just got another couple of examples which have been really meaningful to me. So I do feel I'm a bit indulgent just sharing some moments which have been really powerful and influential in my work in dementia. So these again were from Hearthstone and in the US, and I'd just gone on a 3-week placement just to sit in the care homes and observe and learn from people who have dementia. And that's my favourite way to learn about dementia, is dementia. And one lady said to me, "They will be okay, you know." And another lady said, you can tell which this lady, the next one was really theatrical, "We've had a marvellous time, darling." So I'll just talk you through those two moments. So I was sat in Hearthstone with some people who have dementia. There was an activity going on. It was my first day in this home. I had 3 days in each of the 6 homes. And the resident, the lady on my right, just put her hand on my thigh and just gently tapped. And she said, she leant in and she said, "They will be okay, you know." And I think she looked at me, maybe I looked a bit lost. You know, I'd just arrived in the States. I didn't know anybody, nobody knew me. And she was just reassuring me. And I thought that was like a really compassionate moment, that somebody with dementia took time and went to the trouble of making sure I felt reassured. So looking at Fredrickson's model, I think there's a perception of safety. So I wonder what, because these two examples are both from Hearthstone, what is it about the way the care is provided in that environment that the residents of people with dementia feel that they can reach out and support and look after other people? So I think they must have a strong perception of safety in that environment. There was a physical connection, there was the contact from her, then the eye contact, her tone of voice and her gestures. And I felt really cared for in a country where nobody knew who I was. This was the first person to really reach out and check that I was okay. And the other person, she was very theatrical. She'd been a model. She was absolutely beautiful. And I was really sad to leave this care home. I was sad to leave each one. I kept getting that lump in my throat, not like a little golf ball, but like a big rugby ball of emotion. And it came time for me to leave. And so this resident and the manager walked me to the lift. It was on one of the higher floors in this building in New York, I think Upper East Side, whatever the posh bit is of New York, we were there. And she saw that I was just getting a bit emotional. I stepped into the lift to like avoid any awkwardness of my emotions pouring out. And she stepped in the lift and embraced me. So it wasn't just a hug, it was a real embrace. And she just said, "We've had a marvellous time, darling." And I just thought, what is it about these people in this setting that they feel they, you know, just they would be proactive. They weren't passive in noticing who I was and what my needs might be. They're really proactive in reaching out. So again, I think you could see what Fredrickson talks about as the right conditions for positive resonance were there. So from the science we were talking about, I would imagine both of our brains were syncing up, we were having this shared emotion, and it promoted feelings of mutual understanding and mutual care that haven't left me. So, bringing my reflections, my emotional weeping, my reading, and just my thoughts, I just feel that my reflections for my understanding of dementia and connection and communication are that really it's the smallest moments of connection that can be really important when we connect with someone who has dementia. And just seeing as I've really stolen Fredrickson's work for the majority of this presentation, I think it's in those ordinary and everyday exchanges that those relationships and communications really are so valuable. And Fredrickson says that these are life-giving opportunities for connection, growth and health for us and the person with dementia in our case. Remember, she's not writing about dementia, but the ripple effects can be across a whole social network. So that's really where I'm at in my reflections and my reading, and I hope some of it might have been of use to you and where you're at with your journey with dementia. So thanks, Emma.
Thanks, Natalie. That was really interesting, and I think there's something that was resonating with me as you were talking about that, and I was thinking about COVID, and I was thinking about how our life might feel at the moment, certainly for some of us, and just that sort of, that actually the small moments have become the big moments. So like normally we want a holiday, we want to go shopping, we want to do something big, and it's big, and we've not been able to do any of that. So now we've sort of, our experiences have shrunk down, and actually those really small connections now have just become really important. So by chance seeing a friend in the park as you're walking your dog, that now has become massive. So that's, I had that in my head as I was listening to you, and just thinking that we've all been forced to slow down. We've probably all been more in the moment with our families, with our pets, with ourselves. So just thinking about being in that moment. And then I was trying to practice these new words. So oxytocin.
Yeah.
Then parasympathetic nervous system. So I think I've got those sorted now.
Yeah.
And I was sort of thinking about some of the sessions that we've been running over the last, even just this week really. We had this lovely pilot that we ran on Monday, and at the end there was this shared kiss. So it was a creative session. There was poetry, there was drawing, we were sharing lots of different things, and at the end there was all maybe like 6 screens on, and we had to blow a kiss. Everybody had to blow a kiss to somebody. You had to catch it and you had to pass the kiss on, and one of the screens was empty because he had to go and take a phone call. So the carer went to take the phone call, and the person with dementia came on, and she sort of quickly caught up with what was going on, and as the kiss came to her, she caught the kiss, and then she was able to pass the kiss on. And then she said, what about my husband? He's not had his kiss and he's not on. So then we all had to blow a kiss back to pass on to her husband. And it was that thing, like, I know for me and Rachel, because we're both on the session, that like made our Monday, it's probably made our week. What might be seen as like such a small thing, but actually for this lady, she was able to, you know, she was on the same page as, and that's what we talk about all the time within Power Conversations, that we want to be on the same page with people. But she was on the same page. We were all doing the same activity, and at that point there wasn't any things you know, getting in a way. So she was able to be part of that sort of connection. Through love. I know you don't like that word, but it was sort of a bit of love.
And I love, you know, I love everybody. Like, I love my students and I love my colleagues and I love my doctors. So in my life, I use that word very liberally and authentically. But I think for some people, it has a very specific meaning. And so I'm not going to use it in this presentation, because if somebody doesn't use the word that way, I mean, oh, well, if I don't love them, none of this relates. So that's why I've thrown that out for now. I think it's about if you can feel that connection, it doesn't matter whether you feel love for that person or not. I'm sure the guy who was saying no to everything I said, even like my name, I'm sure he didn't feel love for me, but he felt a connection. So I think connection's probably a better word.
I think it's a strong word as well. And I think I'm just gonna put it out there that no one's asked the question yet. Now, last week you were really quiet with your questions. You don't get that excuse this week. So I'm gonna, as we carry on chattering for a bit, I'm putting the onus back onto you lot. There's 28 of you, so you've You've not disappeared. So you've either all still watching telly and you've put us on mute. But anyway, get some questions coming our way while we have a little chat about that. But I just, yeah, everything that you were saying, I think this really, so we've really built on the non-verbal element of empowered conversations over the last 6 months. And we do this one exercise where we get people to list all of the different non-verbal forms of communication, and then it's in a table, and it becomes this massive, there's hundreds of things on there, and they might all, not hundreds, but there's a lot on there, and then each of those might mean something, and each of those might, you know, tell us something else. And by the time you put it all on there, you think we just rely, you know, when we think about communication and connection, quite often we just think about our voices and the sound that comes, and we miss all of this wealth of other ways of connecting. So I was thinking that a lot of this will really like feed into those discussions and into the work that we do. So I'm hoping that Paul's on actually, because he's got the course tonight, so he can start threading some of this into that, because I think it's really valuable, and it's sort of really, you know, we talk about being calm, we do breathing exercises at the start of all of our courses and our sessions, because that just helps with the connections we can make, and this is sort of giving me a bit of science behind why we do all these bits, which has been great.
One thing I've learned from you, Emma, and I think, you know, this is, I think I mentioned in an email about holding the silence, because when Emma and I have taught like this online, I'm so enthusiastic and I just want to speak and share, but Emma's taught me, hold the silence, don't keep, you know, you might be excited about it, Natalie, but just hold the silence a bit longer. And in so many of those examples, it was in the silence, it was when you weren't expecting maybe a communication, that the really powerful communication happened. And because I am a teacher, I am used to speaking, but I'm really learning, and I've learned from you, Emma, and empowered conversations, like the value of the silence. That's not been part of my repertoire for long ever, so that's my bit of being currently a work in progress, is the silence, and to hold it, and how powerful the silence is. And in music, the silence, the bits when there's no notes, actually make the music, really, don't they?
Yeah, definitely, they build that up. Oh, Margaret's on, she'll know all about music. So we've got an anonymous question. Do you think that oxytocin deficiency can lead to depression, even emotional shutdown?
So I'm no expert on this. Like I say, I've really just been I learned these things in my BSc, and then just really re-engaged with the science reading recently. But what I have been reading is about, if people are socially isolated, then they seems to have a negative effect on the parasympathetic nervous system and oxytocin and depression. So the reading I did was very specifically about social isolation, and really what we're doing, hopefully with empowered conversations approaches, is to avoid that social isolation, isn't it? And then hopefully avoid that downward spiral, and instead create an opportunity and the circumstances and situation where oxytocin levels can rise and parasympathetic nervous system activity can rise, because the opposite does seem to be that loneliness and depression.
Yeah, if you think of the parasympathetic nervous system, when we use an invitation to respond, so we use that instead of using the question. So if we use a question and someone feels anxious, I'm just linking it straight into the parasympathetic nervous system, then you could imagine that someone would quickly sort of shut down from joining us in that conversation. And by us sort of putting an invitation out there, bringing somebody into a conversation in a different way, where we're not putting them under any stress, then maybe that's happening as well. Don't know, Natalie, you've read more than me.
Oxytocin is known to reduce anxiety, and so that again stop that negative downward spiral in somebody's emotions and psychological well-being.
So we've got a question from Margaret, the wonderful Margaret Garnett, who I know will already be on Amazon buying those books. That sense of care you got from the residents at Hearthstone, have you had it in settings in the UK?
I've had more a feeling of friendship, maybe, rather than care, but maybe in the settings that I've been in the UK, I've kind of been just going through the setting, maybe to a meeting, or whereas at Hearthstone I was there, although it was only 3 days in each home, I was just, everything was slower if I'm going to a meeting, unfortunately, you're moving quicker, aren't you? And just having a quick chat in a corridor, maybe with somebody who has dementia, or in a lounge. Whereas I had 3 days in each home. I was so much slower. And in Hearthstone, everything was slower. Everybody breathed slowly, spoke slowly, moved slowly. So I was much slower. And so I think that created the opportunity for that full 3-step of positive resonance, so that we did get to the mutual care. Whereas I think sometimes the me in normal life at normal pace, it opportunity to get to that 3rd stage of mutual care. Whereas in Hearthstone, I had the luxury of time, really, and it just created those opportunities.
Okay, and Margaret said, thank you for a huge amount to think about. And that sort of made me think about that learning from Hearthstone, and how we can sort of, I know you've sort of said it in a nutshell, but there's points there that we can learn from and that we can try and bring into our daily life, isn't there, about how we communicate and connect. And it's not that easy when you're caring for somebody 24/7 in the home during COVID, when that person wants to leave the house. But if there are elements there which enable us to connect better with people, and maybe it is about us sort of feeling calm. So, you know, one of the things we've been doing in all of our sessions is breathing, exercising. We've been doing some meditation. So we've really sort of emphasized that with carers. I'm just wondering, are there any sort of pointers just to share with people that they could take away and reflect on?
Yeah, I think for me, the main thing that I learned at Hearthstone was to breathe slowly. Nobody told me to breathe slowly. But I went into the first home the first day, and they asked me just to sit in the reception. And even without getting any further, I was just struck by this calm. All there was this receptionist. I said, "Oh, hi, I'm Natalie. I'm here for a couple of days." But there just felt like a real calmness as I went through the door into the rest of, well, they call them assisted living. That sense of calmness, just there every moment, every day. And obviously the moments of laughter. The lady who put her hand on my thigh and said, "They'll be okay," you know. I went into that home on the second, like martial arts with sticks. So, you know, there's a variance in the calmness. So she was doing the martial arts with the sticks. But for me, as a English nurse who probably rushes around as my usual way of being, I just knew I had to not be like that, otherwise I'd look like really ridiculous. So I just learned to, I thought, what's going on? The whole place was breathing slowly, moving slowly, and just thought, I better do this, otherwise I'm just really, it was just, I was embarrassed to not be like that. But then I realized the benefits of it. So if in doubt, just breathe slowly, take it from there.
I reached out to, so we delivered some online courses for some care home staff, Natalie, with you. So we've done it for the Greater Manchester Teaching Care Home Programme. And that was brilliant. So we delivered 3 courses, didn't we, to people from 3 different, from lots of different care homes, but in 3 courses. And so I reached out to some of them, obviously, because what's been happening for the care homes in the last few months has been really difficult. I didn't really know what to do, so I just sort of reached out with an email and just said, I'm thinking about you. I know it's really hard. I just want you to know that, you know, I'm really thinking about you and sending you love. I did actually send love in an email. And they came back and, you know, not straight away. I said, I don't even expect a response to this email. I just want you to know that I've been thinking about you. And they came back and said, so we, you know, this very simple breathing exercise that we do really sort of hit home with a couple of staff there. And they just came back and said they've been using that throughout lockdown. They've been using it for themselves to help calm themselves. They've been using it with residents to help calm them. And it's just sort of stuck as something that they just do now. And, you know, sometimes it feels like an add-on that we just put the breathing exercise in the beginning, but it just makes you realize how important it is just to slow down and just to take stock of what's going on and be in the moment with people. Otherwise we do miss a lot. We've only had 2 questions. I'm not letting you come in any more seminars, you lot. You're terrible. I can't believe
it. Ruined everything.
I think it's because you've used 2 big words and they're like parasympathetic nervous system. I'm going to write a poem about that later. So maybe we should just hold the silence for a little while and let them ask us
questions. which is really hard for me to do.
I have got one more micro connection that we made this week, but I won't share it until somebody asks a question. So there's 25 of you on there. So when one of you asks a question, then I will, oh, wait a minute. Pressure, who's cracked? Anna's cracked under it. I've had moments of connection with my mum by singing with her. What's your view of music as a way of establishing connection?
So interesting, the moment I thought I would cry in this presentation, I didn't. So I was emailing John Zeisel, whose homes we were and who's going to do a presentation in a few weeks. And I said, I'm really nervous about sharing the one of the moment when the woman embraces me in the lift, because normally that floors me. But I've been practicing not to cry at that moment, just because it just, you know, I was overwhelmed with her compassion. But just going back into the earlier days, because I was just there for 3 days, and that was day 3. At that home, they had a singer who would come in and do a group session. He looked like he'd walked straight out of a Ralph Lauren catalogue. So I'd sit in watching him play this piano, and then out of the window was the Hudson River, and the residents were just very relaxed and obviously felt in a safe space. So that was really good. But this lady also had a private session with this guy. So I said, could I join in? I'll just sit. And I asked her, I said, yeah, that's fine, come in. And he played, you must have known he'd worked with her before. He played the something from Chicago, the musical where everybody's in like the black leotards, very sexy dancing. And she got up and she started dancing exactly the way they do in Chicago. And because I was in New York, I'd just seen it on Broadway. And so I just said to her, oh, that's a great musical, isn't it? And she like looked really puzzled. She said, what musical? So it was not a connection. It was a not connection, but it just, and I didn't ask her a question about it. I just made the comment, oh, you know, it's a great musical, isn't it? But I then found out later that she'd actually been on the stage. So, you know, her love of theatre and dancing and musicals was very, very much at the front of her brain, especially when the Ralph Lauren guy was in his pink shirt and chinos, was playing this beautiful piano. So music for her didn't just evoke a memory that she listened, it evoked a very proactive get up and do the whole dance routine. And she had a white and blue, you know, there's like French Breton tops, and it slipped off her shoulder because she was this, you know, she just carried it off in a beautiful, stunning way. So for her, the music was definitely a powerful modulator of her experience. But the guy then went to another resident's room, and I asked her, would it be okay if I come in and listen? And she was like resting in her bed, so she didn't really respond. But I was like, I'll keep monitoring, because you haven't said yes, but you haven't said no, but I'll just see how we go. He started playing a guitar, and she was shooting me the death stare, like hatred, hostility, no words. And I thought, she very clearly doesn't want me here. She wants her moment with the Mr. Ralph Lauren of the music world. So realised straight away, you know, that was obviously very, very important in her weekly routine, was to be sung to by this beautiful man. So I quickly left, because I realised she was very clearly saying to me, no, you're definitely not welcome here, get out. No words were said, but I got the message very, very clearly.
Thanks, Natalie. I'm sure Margaret and Barbara have probably got some comments they're going to add on to this as well, as music is very close to both of their hearts. And I know Anna she's been to see her mum this week. I hope you don't mind me sharing, Anna, but she went to see her mum this week in a care home through windows. So, but did manage to see it and used song and connected with her mum through song. So that's really lovely. Janet has said, I don't have a question, but I'd like to say I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation, Natalie. Very moving. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to open the polls. So you'll see that pop up at the bottom. 2 very quick questions asking you what you thought of today and whether you'd come on another one. So one of the moments of micro connection that we had this week is we had a disco, and we brought on a care home as a little bit of a pilot. So we've been doing the disco with a few carers and people with dementia, and then we've got friends we've built a friendship with over at in Blakely at each step. So we invited them onto the disco just to see how it went. And Joy also made me invite Elizabeth the goat, but that's a different story. I'm not going to tell you about Elizabeth the goat. Anyway, so we had maybe, I think it was 4 ladies, and there was this beautiful moment where a song came on. I can't remember what the song was. But we all started doing the same dance, so we were sort of doing this, and we'd never met them before, they'd never met us. We were on a screen, you know, it's not the most natural position for us all to be in, but through the music and just that movement, we did connect. So we all connected at the end. We were really happy with ourselves. We all gave ourselves like a big round of applause, so that was lovely. And then with someone secretly has said, "How are the dogs?" I don't know if that's to you or me, Natalie. It could be either.
Well, my dogs, that could be Sarah. So I've been practicing using the phrase calm and connect with the dogs this morning, today, because I've got my 2 dogs who are normally calm, but I've got my daughter's like gun dog. It's a proper dog, German short-haired pointer, so it kind of ruins the dynamic. And so it's the 4 of us home alone today. So I kept telling them, calm and connect, boys, calm and connect. And it worked until just before the session. I've had to go down and separate them all. So we're all on different levels of the house because we're losing our calmness and connection. So I'll go and see. The house is probably wrecked.
But it's okay because it didn't impact on the seminar, so it doesn't matter, does it?
It doesn't. I'll go and do all the cleaning up now and the mending and.
It was Dr. Joy to Natalie. That comment was from, not Sarah. It was
oh yeah.
Dr. Joy herself.
Joy knows the 2 well-behaved dogs, not the real dog.
Brilliant. I think I feel like that's it. If we're starting to talk about dogs, I feel like we've come to the end of the seminar. But in a nice way, you know, it's good to talk about our dogs. So next week we have a conversation with Rachel and Amanda from Empowered Carers, who are going to be joined by a local one of the Salford commissioners, and also by a family carer. So we're going to have a similar format to this, but we're going to be sharing the work of Empowered Carers with everybody. I've done the poll, so hopefully you've finished that. I would just like to say thank you so much, Natalie, for giving us your time today. It's been really interesting.
Thanks everyone for taking the time to listen.
Once you've finished reading all those books, if you can just summarise it into a paragraph and send it to me, that would be...
Yeah, I will do. I'll literally cut the bits out for you and pop them in an envelope. Let's be old school.
Brilliant. And thank you to everyone for coming along to the seminar this week. I hope to see you again. And thank you very much, Natalie from Damien.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thanks,
take care, everybody, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.